Hello and welcome, it's Neil Dougan here. Today we're going to look at the philosophy around fear and fear as it relates to the TRIM program. So this is week 7 philosophy. So we have two particular areas within the subject of fear as it relates to TRIM that we're going to particularly focus on, and then we're going to look at the general context of fear and how fear actually impacts on our body and our entire metabolism, the way that we're operating. So the particular areas that we're focusing on the fear of being poisoned, and in my clinical experience what I've found is that we have a tremendous fear built up within ourselves of actually being poisoned, our body responding to this fear of toxicity, or this fear of being poisoned in many complex ways, all of which lead to us actually holding our weight. The second issue, once again, which has come out of my clinical observation, has been the fear of offending. So particularly what we're talking about here is offending nature or the divine. So for people who are believers, then what we're talking about here is the fear of offending God. However, that said, for people who are on a spiritual path of some type or other, then there is the sense of actually the potential that you might be offending nature by what you're choosing to eat and how you're eating. And the associated question that goes with that is, do I deserve to be alive? So do I deserve to actually have an existence at all? Comes into this fear of offending that we're talking about here. So an associated process that goes with that is that you get certain foods actually having certain types of belief systems associated with them. Obviously, when we're talking about fear of offending the divine or something along those lines, what we're talking about is a belief system which actually is involved in it. And what we see is that certain types of foods get certain types of belief systems associated with them, and these belief systems, particularly if they have an emotional charge, will actually interact with how our body's actually presenting itself with fear. So what we actually see happening then is when we consume a certain type of food, we're triggering a certain type of emotional blueprint or behavior or habit system, which means that our body then processes the particular food in a certain type of way. So this is very, very specific, and it's related to the belief systems that we have associated with the particular type of food. Now, our culture gives us many of these belief systems. So for example, the current belief at the moment is that sugar is bad for you, for example. So what we do is we take the belief system around sugar is bad for you, and we associate with it an entire set of a range of emotional responses to it. Every time we take some sugar into our bodies, then we trigger this emotional blueprint that goes with it. And this is all fear related, and all of the fear responses within the body kick in and begin to actually play out. So you can see that these are very involved and interrelated issues with fear. And in TRIM, what we're doing is we're actually going in and we are addressing the whole process around how we pick up a belief system and how we associate it with a certain type of food, and then further how we're associating that fear response with the actual metabolism within the body. So we have some other particularly important and strong fears that we need to address actually here in what we're talking about in this video. And one of the really important ones is the fear around your purpose in life. So what we're talking about here is, from a biological perspective, if we're just thinking of ourselves as animals, then we really only have the purpose of staying alive long enough to reproduce, and then our time's up. We've done our job, if you like. And of course that ties in with the the average age at death that we saw, for example, 4,000 or 5,000 years ago. People were only living till they were 25, 26 years old, and because at that point they'd really run out of their the reproductive processes, particularly if they started having children at 12 or 13. So that this fear of being past your use-by date is an incredibly important fear in terms of how it interrelates with your physiology. So what we see happening with that is that we have this feeling that we are actually living past our use-by date, and so therefore we need to conserve every moment and every resource that goes with it. And the accumulation, the steady accumulation of body fat is a classic example of that, but there are many other issues in there as well. The counter to that, of course, is to actually have a greater purpose. So providing you actually have this well-defined and well-understood purpose within your life, then your body doesn't need to actually be shutting everything down, because indeed there's a purpose and a reason for it to be continuing to be vigorous and active. Okay, so that's really what I wanted to talk to you about today in relationship to fear. When we have a look at the science, we'll go into some of the biochemistry that's going on with relationship to fear. It's a very well studied and very well understood science, so we'll look at that in the next video. But from the perspective of how we're actually philosophically approaching this within TRIM, what we're really looking at is the way in which fear particularly relates to food, and those particular issues that we're talking about there are the major issues that come into play. So hope you enjoyed that. Make sure you post your questions on the TRIM Facebook group, and I look forward to hearing from you. Thank you.